Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today we're going to do a Q&A. This is episode 2 of the Q&A series, and this is where I take your comments from YouTube and other places and expand on my answers and give you some of my opinions about the subjects that you bring up. And at the end of the video, I've got some other things I want to talk about. But before we jump into this, I want to say, first of all, thank you for all the great comments that I have gotten lately. Thank you to everybody who has subscribed to this channel, and thank you to everybody who has gone to EzeeLinux on Facebook and given that a like. That community is really growing over there, so thank you very much. And the first question that I'm going to jump into, there's really no way for me to answer this without probably pissing somebody off, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's the way I feel about it. So the question is, hi Joe, I'm a new Linux user and I need some help. I have installed Ubuntu 15.10 and I have a problem with an application running in localhost/IANSEO. The program is called IANSEO and it's a program for archery competition. He says that he's followed the manual from the developer and it doesn't work. In other words, how to install the software. So I jumped over to their site and took a look at it, and this is the installation instructions for getting this particular program on your Linux box. And I really hate to single any developer out because I am aware of the challenges that you guys faced, and I appreciate anybody who supports Linux. However, there's a good way to support Linux and there's a sucky way to support Linux, and this developer has chosen the sucky way to do it. And I get a lot of people who ask about when they go read about software and then they come across this thing where you either have to compile it or you have to download a tarball, a tar.gz or a tar.bz2 file or something like that, extract that, and then manually install it on the system. The reason why they're doing this is that they don't want to take the time to actually package their software for individual distributions. Okay? So, for Ubuntu, you could put that software in a deb file. You could try and get it into the Ubuntu repository, submit it to the Ubuntu maintainers, and see if you can get it included. Or you can set up a PPA, which is a private program archive, and then you can make your software available to Ubuntu users through that, and they come to your site, and then they add your repository and download it. We've been through this in past videos. What these people have done is basically they've given you a tarball, and now they're going to tell you how to manually install it regardless of the distribution. So the first thing they do here is list all the dependencies. This is stuff that you have to have installed on the computer to make this program work. And we got MySQL in here, which is a pretty heavy-hitting database program. And okay, so we get all the dependencies, and now they show you where to download the tarball, which is this part right here. And now we're going to go down here and they're going to talk about changing mods and we're going to all this other crap. Okay, look, this is not a good way to install software on your computer. All Linux software is available somewhere as a tarball. Somewhere it's available in source code. And if you want to, you can compile from source code, or you could get somebody's tarball and you could manually put it on a machine. The problem here is that unless you know exactly what you are doing and you understand dependencies, then chances are this is not going to work. A lot of times when I have tried to do this in the past, I have found that people's instructions just don't work. They're for older distributions. The dependencies cannot be met. There's problems here. And it just doesn't work half the time. And when it does, then you have to know how to manually put an icon in the menu and all this other stuff, and you get no maintenance on this whatsoever. So this software will never get updated once you install it. If you do happen to find that there is an update, what you're going to have to do is go through the whole process again and reinstall it. So this is not a good way to do this, and I strongly discourage novice users from either compiling their own software or getting a tarball and trying to put it on their machines. It just doesn't work very well, and it's a crappy way to support Linux. The Google folks offer Google Chrome, and they have managed to compile it in such a way They offer a deb file that you can download for Ubuntu and Debian, and then they have an RPM file that works on Fedora and it works on OpenSUSE. And in the Arch Linux world, if you want Google Chrome, you can get it from the Arch user repository, and other distributions have some way of getting it as well. And so therefore it can be done with not a minimum of effort, but just a little bit of effort to get your software packaged. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of people who are packaging software for Linux will package it as a deb file first. Ubuntu is very popular on the desktop, and Ubuntu's children, so therefore that's a good way to start. So a lot of times you will be able to find a PPA. And if you can't find a PPA, and if you can't find it in the repositories, there you go. The other thing to talk about here is the fact that with all the software developers, the code is posted somewhere if it's open source. And the very latest, greatest version may be available, and you can compile it. However, start with the one that's in the repositories first. If that don't work for you, look for a PPA. It is not that important to have the latest cutting-edge software that you are going to compile it yourself. I've actually had a couple of clients who say, they're looking at a particular application and they go, well, version 2.1 is in the repositories and version 2.5 is out, but it's not in the repository yet. That's because it takes time to get there, or for some reason the maintainers have not decided to upgrade that particular piece of software. Maybe there's a stability issue. The latest, greatest software is great, but that also means you get the latest, greatest bugs. So what's in the repositories is usually nice and stable, and it'll work with your particular distribution of Linux. So, as a matter of fact, you can do this with any piece of Linux software. If you go to the Mozilla site, you can download, and here I have it here, you can download Firefox in a tarball. So if I click on this, it's going to offer me a tarball to download. And then I can extract that, and if I know what I'm doing and follow the steps, I can use Firefox directly from Mozilla. There's a couple advantages to doing that. First of all, you are going around the distributions version, and if they've modified Firefox a little bit, which a lot of distributions do, you don't get those modifications. However, you don't get automatic updates, which means that you will have to use the update protocol within Firefox to do that. But you can do it, and you can do it pretty much with any of the software, open source software that's available for Linux. Do you need to do it? I don't think so. And if you're a novice user, you really shouldn't use it. You shouldn't do it. First of all, there's a chance you could trash the system doing this. You've got to know what you're doing, gang. I'm going to talk more about distributions a little bit later on, okay? And we're going to talk about software because somebody brought up an interesting point about that. But let's move on to our next question. Okay, a company wants to understand / have experience with Linux. What do you translate this to mean? What should I do to get experience with Linux? Well, I asked this person who asked this question, James White, exactly what he was talking about. And he was talking about learning more about Linux beyond just using Linux. So therefore, I answered him and told him that there are some places to start. Okay, using Linux is a great way to learn about it if you're a casual home user. But if you're going to be doing it in a business environment and you need to have certification, and this is something that you're interested in, there's a couple of places that you can go. First of all, the Linux Foundation offers all kinds of training and certification for sysadmins and engineers. And if you go to their site here, you can learn more about the training program that you could take. To become a sysadmin, it's really not too terribly expensive. The class, one of the main classes that you need to take is the Linux 101 course. I took this class, and you can actually audit it for free, and you will learn a lot about how Linux works from that class, and then you could carry that on, and then you could take the sysadmin certification test here, and the fee for that changes, so you'll just have to look up and see what that is, and that will give you a certification. I can personally say that that's a really good place to start. That class is pretty awesome, and teaches you a lot of very groovy things about Linux. And before I switched to Linux 100% and completely dumped Windows and got out of it, I actually took this class, and it gave me the confidence to finally say, okay, well, I don't need anything else. I can make this work, because then I knew I could bail myself out of trouble. So that's a good place to start. That's another good place to look. And then there's also, I want to go back to the other desktop. I want to go to the next tab in my browser here. Linux Academy is something worth looking at. They offer training courses on all kinds of things, and they do it for a fee, but their prices are quite reasonable. And so if you're new to Linux, you could definitely take their Introduction to Linux course. They have all kinds of micro courses. If you just want to learn about one thing, like maintaining databases, they have it here, and then you can take these online courses. And this is also good if you're a long-time Linux user and you just want to brush up on things. Here's Linux Academy. So there's a fee involved. They offer the training, but it's a good place to start. There is a lot of great training out there for Linux, and between Linux.com or the Linux Foundation and Linux Academy, there's pretty much nothing you can't do. I mean, you can get the training here to build your own drivable car, your own self-driving car or your own robot. This is what these guys do. So if you want to know how to do that stuff, you want to learn how to program, this will get you started. So that's a good place to look. All right, back to, this is a very interesting comment that I got, and I didn't respond to it because I just wanted to let it stand. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I kind of see where the point here, and I see where this is coming from. He says, I consider the amount of Linux distros to be one of the main reasons the OS cannot be adopted by the mainstream at this time. I would argue that Linux is already mainstream. It is, especially when you're talking about Ubuntu. That's pretty much, it might not be the lion's share of the market or whatever, but it is definitely mainstream at this point, but we won't argue that. It says there should be one distribution and many different packages that can be installed to make it function in different ways. That way everyone can have what they want and download it from inside the one distro. No wonder people aren't developing for it on a large scale. Well, they are developing for it on a large scale. The open source community is vast, and there's a lot of applications out there. But going back to the first question I answered about having to package your software for the different distributions, that is an impediment. Some developers just don't want to fool with that, and they don't want to deal with it, so therefore they don't do it. With that many distros, it's not like even they can guarantee 100% success across all distros. If they take the time to actually package, maintain, and test the packages, they could do that. But it does require effort, and like I said, I can see this point of view. I can understand that, especially from somebody on the outside looking in. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you're talking about Linux, it is not a company. It is not a product. It is a community of people. And anytime you get a community of people together, and you're going to have differences of opinion. And the different distributions of Linux represent a group of people, or even sometimes one person's opinion on what they think will work best for them, and they want to share that with other people. This is why there are so many distributions. And the other thing to keep in mind is that the one thing that keeps all the distributions different from one another more than anything else, it's not just what desktop environment, what tools are included, and all that other stuff. It's the way the software is installed. The biggest difference between Ubuntu and Fedora is the fact that Ubuntu uses apt tools and deb packaging, and Fedora uses yum or DNF tools, and then they use Red Hat package management, which is RPM. OpenSUSE uses RPM package management. They have zipper tools to do that, or the YAST to install. Each distribution has a different way of handling software. There are really essentially two package formats. If you get right down to it, and like I said, going back to Google Chrome, they package for Ubuntu and Debian with a Deb package. They package for OpenSUSE, and Fedora with the RPM package. And a lot of other distributions use the RPM package management system. So there's kind of that you can do that. You can package something that will work across a wide variety of distros if you know how to do it. Ubuntu right now is working on a project. I shared the keynote address from Scale, which is the Southern California Linux Expo, from Mark Shuttleworth, who is the founder of Ubuntu and Canonical, and he was talking about a new project that they're working on called Snappy. And Snappy package management is going to be different from anything that we've had up to now in Linux, especially in Ubuntu. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to go out to GitHub and it's going to get the source code and it's going to compile that locally on the computer. Kind of like what Yowert does with the Arch user repository. Because in Arch, you can go get a vast amount of software and compile it locally on your computer. And then the system will actually keep tabs on that and update that software. So if you compile on Ubuntu yourself, you're not getting updates. But in Arch, with the Yowert tool and the Pacman tools, it will actually watch what's in the AUR, and if you get a new version in there, it will update it on your computer. So that's kind of what Snappy is going to do. And the other thing that Snappy is going to do is that when it installs an application, it's going to run it in what they call a sandbox or a container, which means that that application is not going to have access to the entire system. Right now, if you install an application on Ubuntu using app tools, when you install that application, you give that package root access to your system. You have to, so it will install. So you better trust the package maintainer, and you better, trust the package itself, because you just gave this package, this installer program, the ability to change anything on the system that you want it to. Snappy package management is going to be where you can install the application, but you don't have to give it root access to do that. And a lot of mobile formats do that now. I think that's pretty much how installing apps on an Android phone works. And I'm not an expert in this area at all, but I do find that concept interesting. So as we move forward here, I'm thinking that when we have things like Yowert in Arch and we have Snappy in Ubuntu, we're going to move to a place where we have a more universally accepted way of handling software in Linux. I think that, some people have said, this is a debate that's raged for years, they've talked about a universal installer. In other words, that all of the different distributions of Linux dump what they have, and then they come up with a universal installing format, just like this fellow here is talking about. And that would be a huge help, because then developers who develop for Linux, now they don't have to worry about packaging in RPM. They don't have to worry about coming up with different versions that work on Ubuntu 12.04, 14.04, and 15.10, which are the current running versions. They could just make one nice big monolithic package that would be installed on Linux systems. So yes, this is it's part of the eccentricity of the Linux community, and it's just kind of the way it is. But when you have the acceptance that Ubuntu based distributions are getting, it's kind of not mattering as long as it doesn't matter right now as long as you stay within that ecosystem. And the Ubuntu ecosystem, one of the reasons that I use it is because there's so much software available either in the repositories or the PPAs that's easy to maintain and updates itself. I love what Arch Linux does. I love Manjaro. I think Manjaro is a great distribution. The only thing about Arch Linux and Manjaro that keeps me from using it are stability issues. It's not as stable as Ubuntu. At least for my use case, it's not. Ubuntu has proven to be 14.04, Linux Mint, Linux Lite, which is what we're running here, has proven to be the most stable Linux that I personally have ever seen. So that's why I stay in this ecosystem. But I'm telling you, if you give the Manjaro folks a few more years to get the stability under the operating system that it needs, it'd probably be a big rival for Ubuntu. So, and one of the main reasons that I would want to use Arch Linux or Antergos or Manjaro or anything based on Arch is to have access to that AUR, because that is an awesome feature. So anyway, that's my take on that. As time moves on, I think this is going to become less of an issue. I think Snappy package management is going to be something that we're going to have to watch really closely, because 3, 4, 5 years from now, we may be, instead of using apt install whatever package we want at the terminal, we may be doing snap packages. And if we're doing that, that's going to really change a lot in Linux. So we'll just wait and see. Okay, final question here. And this is just a quick one, guys. This was a comment that I got. And it says, the problem is I really want to go to Linux, just I'm scared of the compatibility with software and gaming, because most of the time it takes a performance hit. Also, the terminal stuff seems scary. Okay, well, let me tell you what. If you're interested in Linux, and I've said this before, I'm going to say it again, the absolute best way to get into Linux is to get a second machine. If you're currently running Windows or Mac and it's doing what you want it to do, but you're curious about Linux for whatever reason you are, save up a little bit of money and get yourself a used machine. Buy it off of eBay and do a little research and find out what machines run Linux best. I've had really good luck with HP professional machines like EliteBooks and things like that, and Pavilions and stuff. They seem to run Linux quite well. And get you this machine and set it up in the corner and put Linux on it. And then learn there. Don't just, say, well, I'm going to go to Linux and then blank out your Windows partitions and install Linux on your machine and expect that you're just going to be able to pick up where you left off and it's going to be all peaches and cream. It's not. You're probably going to end up very frustrated. You will probably end up reloading Windows, and that is because you can't switch. Windows and Linux and Macintosh and Linux are entirely different systems. And just because you think that you are a Windows power user at this point and you know everything about the system, that doesn't mean that stuff that you know is going to translate to the Linux world. As a matter of fact, it won't. People who are actually very proficient with Windows computers have the hardest time jumping to Linux, because they end up having to unlearn all of the crap that they have had to learn to keep Windows going when they come to Linux. And so my suggestion is always to start out by getting another machine, installing Linux on it, poke at it, play with it, have fun with it. Leave your other system alone. Do not put it in a dual boot unless you're 100% comfortable with that, because dual booting causes issues of its own. And I'm going to talk more about that in just a few moments here. Have it on a separate machine. Or download VirtualBox and put Linux in VirtualBox. Put Ubuntu 14.04 in it and play with it. See how far you can get with it. Of course, that's not like running it on hardware. Looking at Linux in a virtual machine is not the same as putting it on hardware. On hardware is the way to learn, because then you're dealing with a real computer and real problems. In a virtual environment, yes, it'll give you a feel for how the desktop works and how some of the software works, but it's not going to be the same as actually running it on its own machine. And the other thing is that if you sit on that side of the fence and you just keep looking over and you're too timid to jump in, you're never going to learn. So the terminal stuff is only scary because you don't know what it is. But it's not that hard to learn, and there's plenty of great videos out there on the internet that will explain to you how the terminal works. There's all kinds of places to learn. So, hey, it's fun. Jump in. It's an adventure. Don't be afraid. Just do it. And so finally, this is a question that I got on a video that I posted a while back called The Dual Boot Deception. That is the most misunderstood video that I have ever posted and causes the most controversy because a lot of the people who watch that video, for some reason or other, maybe I didn't explain myself well or whatever, but they didn't get what I was trying to say. And they go, well, I've dual booted for years and it works fine. Or they'll say, well, this problem that you say, all you got to do is put in this code or do this or whatever. The video was about the fact that when you install Ubuntu or Linux Mint, it will offer to create a dual boot environment on your machine with one click. And if you have a new user to Linux who doesn't know anything about Linux, and maybe they're not that hip to exactly how the entire boot process works with Windows either, this can cause them a great deal of heartache and pain. Because if they just click on that and then it sets up this dual boot environment, now suddenly they have a very complex system to deal with. And running a dual booted computer it's not the same as if it just has one operating system on it, because you're always thinking about what the other operating system is doing. And in my experience, a lot of times, and I've said this in the video before, I'm going to say it again, you're not going to get the most stable environment from either operating system. And it's just because of the way it interacts, and I think it's booting in and out of the systems and switching back and forth. Windows uses the NTFS file system. If you access that from Linux all the time, and then you don't boot into Windows and run like check disk on it, it will actually become unstable, the file system itself, because NTFS needs to be maintained, or if it's not maintained, then it basically breaks itself over time. It's just not the world's greatest system. So that can cause problems with both Linux and Windows. There are time conflict issues that you'll run into sometimes. Windows by default wants to run on local time. Linux likes to run the hardware clock on UTC. You can change that in either one if it doesn't do it automatically. But still, we're talking about editing files or editing the registry in Windows. When you're talking about a new user, they don't know how to do this stuff. They're totally lost, completely confused. So the idea behind that video was just to say, maybe it's not such a good idea to have the installer in Ubuntu and other Linux distributions offer this without any kind of warning. You know? It's just like they don't know what they're getting into, and then they get in trouble. But anyway, the question that I had asked here is how about booting different Linux distros? I personally have never tried this. I know people do it, but since you wouldn't have those time conflict problems and file system conflict problems, I would assume that this would be a more stable way to go. And the nice thing is that if you installed grub on either one of the systems, it would probably find the other bootloader. So it would probably be a little bit easier to do, especially if you're doing two Linux distributions. You probably know more about what's going on as far as the bootloader and the grub menu and all that other stuff. And if you did run into a problem, you could fix it. So yeah, you could dual boot Linux distros. I haven't tried it, but I think I will at some point down the road and just see how it goes. A lot of the problems with dual boots between Windows and Linux come from problems with the bootloader, file system incompatibilities, all kinds of crazy stuff can happen. Doesn't mean it always will. There's a lot of, if you know what you're doing, you can maintain a dual boot and make it work for years. I've done it. This machine that I'm doing this on is actually in a dual boot environment, but I don't recommend it for new users. So that was the point of that video. All right, gang, I think that's about it. I have rambled on all that I need to at this point. And once again, I want to say thank you to everybody who has commented on the videos, people that are watching the videos. Thank you so much. Thank you for your subscriptions and all of the nice positive comments and all the interaction in the community. I like to see that. A lot of times people will post a question, and before I get a chance to answer it, somebody in the community will answer it, which is awesome. I'm so happy to see that happening. I did get one guy that posted something that really torqued me off, man. I got to tell you about this. So a few days ago, I'm going through some files and I found some archived video of some things that I produced for a show called Interface, which is a webcast that I was involved in with a fellow named Scotty D. We did this for about a year, put a lot of work into the show. We never did generate a great deal of interest. We didn't build up a large viewership. I think we were a little bit ahead of our time because we were doing this 2010, 2011. But I produced a lot of stuff for that show, and I came across a couple of videos. One of them, I was installing Ubuntu 10.10 when it was brand new, and for long-time Linux users, you know that Ubuntu 10.10 rocked. So that was kind of fun to watch. And then I also did a video like that about installing Linux Mint 9, which was another awesome distribution of Linux from years ago. And I found a video where I was doing a review on a compressor limiter, which has to do with audio. It doesn't have to do with Linux. I posted that as well. So anyhow, I get this comment on one of those videos from this guy who says, I'm not a fan of YouTubers who post old content to fan new clicks. And then he says, I'm unsubbing. And I thought, really? You know? So I wrote back to him. I said, so you're going to actually unsubscribe from my channel because I posted videos that were streamed live 5 years ago, have never been posted here at all, and are actually new to the channel. You consider this to be me just trying to get clicks. So my final word was, see ya. I mean, come on, gang. This is a YouTube channel. It's not I'm not the CBS television network here, or I'm not the BBC or whatever. This is just a YouTube channel. And my world is bigger than just Linux. Now, I focus on Linux these days because it's what I'm most into, and people seem to be really interested in it. But if I want to post a video that I recorded 5 years ago, I'll do it. And if I want to post a video where I sit on a webcam and talk about the mating habits of monarch butterflies for 45 minutes, I'll do it. I mean, I won't expect a whole lot of views on that thing, but, you know, come on. It's a YouTube channel. It's just funny how some people will put their crazy ideas of things on you. You know, they expect some sort of perfection. So I was a little bit torqued off about that, but I actually just laughed. I mean, like, if you're going to unsubscribe for something like that, see ya. I really don't want you around, man. Obviously, you don't play well with others. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in at the end for you guys who are dedicated viewers and have actually listened to this video up to this point. I thought that was funny. It was like, okay, you're gonna you're welcome to unsubscribe at any time. I'm not holding you here. There are plenty of cat videos. You can go watch Justin Bieber if you like, or whatever. I don't care. This is just what I do, and if you like it, great. And if you don't, well, sorry. You know, can't please everybody all the time. Ain't no way to do it. All right, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go on and do something more productive, like take a nap. Check out EzeeLinux on the web. Check out EzeeLinux on Facebook, and if you would, give it a like. Also, check out freedompenguin.com. Got a new review up there for Linux Lite, and got some new videos and things posted. And there's also a bunch of other articles from other great contributors that you can read. That's a fun website run by Matt Hartley. You need to check that out. Thanks for watching. We'll do it again soon.